Zimbabwe's presidential hopeful, Saviour Kasukuwere, is adamant that he will contest the 23rd of August elections. This despite a court ruling disqualifying him on the basis that he has been living outside of the country more than 18 months. The court has ordered the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission not to include his name on ballot papers. But Kasukuwere's lawyers say they've filed an application to appeal the judgment. For more on the story, I'm joined by his spokesperson and chief election agent, Jaqueline Sande. Jaqueline, appreciate your time this evening. Just bring us up to speed with where things stand. The courts, certainly in the first instance, have said Saviour Kasukuwere's name must not be on the ballot papers, but you've put an appeal, and I believe this is to the Supreme Court.
Yes, indeed, Hugo. Thank you for having me. Good evening. We have indeed, an appeal has been lodged with the Supreme Court through President Saviour Kasukuwere's lawyers. And the effect of that appeal is to suspend the judgment of the lower court. So what happened today is that the matter that was brought by Lovedo Mangwana to seek to expedite the hearing of the appeal was heard by the Supreme Court, and the parties agreed on most of the issues, and timelines were set in which to file both parties' papers, or what we call heads of arguments, and the matter is due to be heard on the 27th of July 2023. That is the determination of the appeal. Until the determination of the appeal or an order of the lower court, which is also set to determine whether or not the order of the High Court should be executed pending the appeal, then we can safely say that President Saviour Kasukuwere remains on the ballot.
So how do you, as Mr. Kasukuwere's team, view certainly the implications of this ban? What does it mean to his political future if, of course, the ban is upheld?
Yes, we are alive to the fact that the ban may remain upheld, but we are also positive that on the papers, the applicant has brought nothing before the court to justify the banning of President Saviour Kasukuwere and his removal from the ballot. There was absolutely no need to find against President Saviour Kasukuwere. At the moment, we remain hopeful that the law will be upheld and applied in a just and fair manner, and therefore we will stand to see President Saviour Kasukuwere on that ballot, because no one is prejudiced by his presence thereof, and there was certainly no need for his ban.
So there are two sides to every story. There's obviously what you've just spoken to us about, which you say is baseless. But let's talk about your argument. What is your argument?
Our argument is that the lower court sought to improperly remove President Saviour Kasukuwere from the voters' roll. This, in our view, from our side, even looking beyond the legal side of things, we've seen that the current government has panicked so much at the prospect of having President Saviour Kasukuwere on that ballot and has brought all these actions to try and stop him. There is a properly outlined procedure for one to be removed from the voters' roll and thus disqualified to stand as president. And the procedure that was followed by the applicant is certainly not it, and is certainly not done during the election period. And this, we argue, that this is for a reason. You can't just then come in and try to throw in legalities when someone has properly been nominated as a candidate. That is wrong.
Now, I believe Section 91 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe speaks, certainly in part, to having been not staying outside of Zimbabwe for a period longer than 18 months. And Saviour Kasukuwere has been residing in South Africa for the greater part of that time, if not longer. Is this not applicable?
Hugo, the section you are referring to of the Constitution refers or alludes to a person being ordinarily resident in Zimbabwe. This is not the question which was before the court. The question before the court was that of Section 23, subsection 3, which then makes reference to a person's qualification to being in a constituency for not less than 18 months, or should be in the constituency for not less than 18 months. So this was the question before the court, which was whether he is an ordinary resident or not in Zimbabwe. And such question, we argue, is not determined by one's presence. As long as one considers Zimbabwe to be their permanent home, then they can qualify to be resident. And a number of factors, there should be a factual inquiry as to that fact, to establish that fact. This factual inquiry was not done. There were shortcuts which were done in order to remove him from the voters' roll using the wrong procedure, and we argue that this is not fair at all.
Were you surprised? Was the team surprised? Was Mr. Kasukuwere surprised when this came up?
We were not surprised. We were definitely anticipating that there would be a fight. Indeed, the system, the government had shown signs that they were not happy by President Saviour Kasukuwere's participation in this upcoming plebiscite. There had been threats before of trying to arrest him using some long lapsed warrants of arrest, and we saw that continuing, and we're anticipating it. But we're also anticipating the courts to do the right thing and apply the law in a just and fair manner, and to follow the right procedures when determining such issues.
Is this the reason that Saviour Kasukuwere is not in Zimbabwe campaigning at the moment?
President Kasukuwere will be in Zimbabwe anytime soon, but part of the reasons are to do with securing his safety once he arrives in Zimbabwe. And yes, indeed, some of those reasons may include the legal cases which are still pending.
Has his safety been threatened?
Yes, Hugo, I think I've alluded to this before, that the circumstances pertaining to his leaving the country prior to this date back to November 2017, when his house was riddled with bullets. There were more than 100 bullet shells which were retrieved and which were shown to the court in a trial in which he was being tried for unlawfully leaving the country. So it would be naive to say that there are no threats or that his safety is not at stake at this particular moment. We are doing everything possible to ensure that his safety is of the paramount consideration.
Now let's talk about his campaign and how effective it is without him being present in the country, because a lot of campaigning is about direct interface with the people that could or won't vote for him. Now, this is obviously not happening. Countdown has begun. In a few days, it'll be a month to August 23rd, and we do not know, the people of Zimbabwe certainly do not know, when he'll be on the streets of Harare, Mount Darwin, or wherever else in the country.
Yes, indeed, his presence will be more effective in spreading the word about him. But trust me, the teams that are on the ground, the response we've heard, I've said this before, has been overwhelming, and we want to thank Zimbabweans for their support and to ask them to hang in there and continue supporting us until he's such a time that he's able to descend into the country and move and meet the people personally by himself. The teams have been working flat out. They are actually overwhelmed. We talk about the distribution of campaign material. This has been the demand has been far surpassing the supply, and we continue to rope in and to bring in more and more campaign material and more team members to try and reach out to people. The word has spread far and wide, and we are confident that the campaign is gathering momentum even in his absence. Well,
one of the stumbling blocks that seems to have hit your campaign trail, or certainly that of many opposition leaders, is that the government of Zimbabwe has now determined that before you put up a message, the message has to be approved by certain authorities. Speak to us about this and what it means to your campaign.
I've seen a circulation, a letter which seems to be from a provincial office seeking to bar all companies operating putting up the billboards from putting up any billboard without any authority. That has no basis in law, and it's certainly one of those things which is showing us that the government is really panicking about having President Kasukuwere.
Is that letter authentic?
I believe that the letter is authentic. We've seen government officials on Twitter acknowledging and approving of that letter, and we believe that appropriate legal action will be taken should we face any challenges in putting up any of our billboards.
So at this juncture, you've been happy putting up your billboards across the country, and there has been no physical interference?
Well, we have heard instances where we suspected that this has been physical interference from the system. We heard one of our electronic billboards along Borodo Road. The minute it was switched on, it was put up, we saw that electricity was switched off in that area. And it is our belief that this is one part of the interference from the government in trying to deter us from spreading our message about our candidate.
Well, finally, talk to us about the message that Saviour Kasukuwere is telling the people of Zimbabwe. What does he bring into the political landscape? There's obviously been a lot of economic issues in Zimbabwe the last few years. What is his response to the challenges that the people of Zimbabwe have been facing?
President Saviour Kasukuwere is very much alive to the challenges being faced by the ordinary Zimbabwean, which ranges from this access to adequate health facilities. We've heard talk for a long time about the absence of cancer machines at the main hospital in Zimbabwe, which is Parenyatra, and people having to fork out about $9,000 for a cancer treatment session and having to wait for long periods. So you see that our health system is in shambles. You see that the economic system has widened the gap between the rich and the poor. There's been an uneven distribution of wealth, where we see that natural resources are being plundered for the benefit of a few. So President Kasukuwere's message is we are going to reform, we are going to renew, we are going to revive our national institutions. We're also going to see an upheaval of the justice system, and we also want to introduce effective and functioning state infrastructure and state systems, so that there is no interference with one arm of the law and the other, with one arm of the state and the other. We want to see a fair and just governance system prevailing in Zimbabwe.
Jaqueline, in my conversation with Saviour Kasukuwere at our studios here in Johannesburg, he spoke highly of the government of national unity several years ago, and he said that potentially has been the most successful government in the last few years in Zimbabwe. Is this his standpoint? Is he looking to a government of national unity should he emerge victorious?
Yes, definitely, Hugo. That is what he is looking at. You will see that he decided to stand as an independent. He could have easily registered another political party. But we have seen that this country is usually polarized along party lines. And this has divided the people and has caused a lot of divisions and animosity amongst the people, to the deterrence of practical solutions and economic development of the country. So indeed, we are looking at the season of the government of national unity. There was much progress during that era. Having stood as an independent, he's going to derive his government from those who are willing to participate and unite with him for progressive purposes to form that kind of a government going forward.
Jaqueline Sande, I appreciate you speaking to us on Africa Today. And Jaqueline Sande speaks for Zimbabwe's presidential hopeful, Saviour Kasukuwere.